Welcoming everyone to another live The Hawks Eye podcast here with Mookie Alexander joining me. We're doing a live preview today of Seahawks Commanders. Obviously, they play at 5 o'clock tonight, so we figured why not do it the day of for once instead of a couple days before. Mookie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm still in disbelief as far as that World Series Game 7. You know, the Toronto Maple Leafs have had an encyclopedia, thick books worth of Game 7 failures, including this year. I don't think I've ever seen a team in hockey, basketball, or baseball lose a Game 7 the way they did. And remember when you and I and Brandon and Dan did the Seahawks syndicates on Wednesday? And I said, wouldn't it be something if the Blue Jays, by some chance, would go up 3-2 with Game 6 and 7 in the wake, in the works, and then lose both, like the Mariners lost the 3-2 lead to the Blue Jays in the ALCS? Well, guess what? It happened. So I guess for one John Schneider to succeed, another John Schneider must fall, and it's evidently the Blue Jays John Schneider. But yeah, that was a classic. That's one that is one that is going to be remembered by everybody who watched that game for a lifetime, either for celebratory reasons or for the Blue Jays fans, the most traumatic night of their lives, because that is a painful one to take.
Yeah, I know. I have a few friends that are Blue Jays fans, and they weren't up for really me bugging them last night. And they were, they were really upset and heartbroken about how it went down. And the only thing I can feel for myself as a similar thing is Super Bowl 49 versus the Patriots that we lost. Like that crushing kind of defeat where you're on the cusp of winning it, and then it just slips through your hands and you basically choke it away. And Toronto, I will say, has a history of being the best at being the choke artists when it comes to sports throughout. So, but Mookie, we're going to touch on the injuries. We're going to touch on Bobby Wagner a little bit. We'll touch on some of these buzz that's come out this morning in regards to the Seahawks and the trade deadline. We'll also talk, can this team get the running game finally going, and our 3 keys to victory. So we'll get into all of that right after this. I had to put the JSN video in there of him dunking. That's such an iconic thing now, Mookie, is him dunking. And the fact that the NFL actually used it as their thumbnail for a while and then fined him still bothers me to this. But Mookie, let's start with this right now. Let's start with this injury and impact, of the matchups. And so with the injury report, we have found out Cooper Kupp is not playing tonight, which I think we all could have guessed when, they asked Mike McDonald in the press conference, hey, are they going to have to do like a test before the game? No, they don't do that. I think that's a pretty strong indication now with Mike when that gets said that the guys aren't going to play. I think it changes a little bit of, Seattle's trade deadline to an extent because you have no Cooper Kupp, heel and hamstring. You've got no Jake Bobo, Achilles injury, which they claimed is not ruptured, which is what something Mike already said. But then you get the report from Jay Glazer today on Fox News NFL Fox, I should say, that Seattle's being very aggressive right now at multiple positions. And I think receiver is probably one of those positions now more than ever.
Yeah, and don't forget that Derek Young is also out, and we don't know to what extent because they didn't put him on IR. They did put Julian Love and Eric Saubert on IR. And by the way, if you see both of us like kind of looking away sometimes, it's because I got red zone on the monitor away from here, and Bryce has got one facing up. So we're just keeping tabs on things. Like I'm hoping that Jackson Dart can lead a touchdown drive at some point, so I have reason to still watch the Niners-Giants game. But anyway, I think wide receiver has become, and this is kind of what was the fear of the downside of bringing in Cooper Kupp is his injury history. Now, everybody's going, how did they get more injured after the bye week? Well, interestingly enough, there is. I wonder if Cup got hurt during the game because
Mhm.
with the bye week, there's no injury report. Would it have been possible that he would have been on the injury report with the heel injury that was initially on there, had they had a game last week? So that's a thing to consider. That just because there's a bye week doesn't mean that everybody came back healthy. But it is worth noting that the hamstring injury did happen in practice apparently, and then the Achilles injury for Bobo also happened in practice. So right now you've got JSN and Torrey Horton, and then White's Cody and Ricky the third, and I don't even know who the other receiver would be. Like, are they're basically just going to be able to roster 4 receivers tonight, and that should mean a big opportunity, I believe, for Elijah Arroyo and AJ Barner. So if you want to see the Titans get involved even more, and I think more Arroyo than Barner, to be honest with you, as that big X option, which I haven't really done a whole lot of this year, this is the time. But I do think that they should consider getting a receiver, not to replace Cup's targets because we don't know how long he's going to be out. But if we can have like a 3A, 3B with Torrey Horton, that's fine. And the reason why I've been kind of in support of a Rashid Shaheed trade is that he has the special teams capabilities. So if there ever comes a time where you're nervous about Torrey Horton, as great as he's been on special teams, like if he becomes so good a receiver that you don't want him in the return game, well, Rashid Shaheed is there. And he's just another option. And that's also doubly important because Derek Young being out takes away another kick returner, somebody who's been excellent at kick returns this season. So I believe that they're going to be looking for receivers, but not somebody who's a wide receiver to anything. This is like a mid to lower level wide receiver situation. And I think is necessary because tonight we're about to find out that as great as Jackson Smith and Jigba has been, there's still a huge gap between JSN and Torrey Horton, who hasn't caught a pass in 2 weeks. So maybe Horton has a breakout game for all we know. Thankfully, the Commanders' defense isn't great, but they are probably hell-bent on selling out to stop the oh, nice. Mac Jones just threw a lollipop while getting hit and got picked off, so the Giants have a chance to score before halftime. But there's just a huge gap between JSN and everybody else that we're going to see the limits of the JSN heavy offense this evening when somebody as valuable as Cup is not in the game.
Yeah, the interesting thing I think as well is with you talk about, the receiver and potentially trading for one now, and it becomes more, I think, of a viable situation for Seattle is we all, to your point, this really is going to test because even though Cup may not have been producing, Cup is still enough of a threat in defensive coordinators' minds of, hey, we can't just let Cup be singled up out there by himself because he will wreak havoc in his own right. Now, really, no one has a book on Torrey Horton. We haven't really seen Torrey Horton except for a few explosive plays here and there. He now is going to be he is receiver 2 tonight. So we're going to see what Torrey Horton can bring as a receiver 2 because as you and me know, Mookie, when we were at, training camp, there were lots of discussions about, hey, he's going to jump Cup this year and become the receiving 2 option. Here's his opportunity to do it. Here's his opportunity to prove to us, hey, look, I'm ready to take that next step in this season in the back half. But to your point earlier about the injuries and not being reported, Sam Darnold showed up on the injury report this week with a chest injury. Nothing like that was really talked about post-game after the Seahawks, win over the Texans. I think this is also a big opportunity for this run game to get going.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, they've been trying, you got to find they have to have spent the last week off figuring out ways of what we do well. How do we do it? How are we going to be able to do it successfully through multiple looks? So we're going to see tonight if that can, these injuries impact. And then on the back end of the defense, obviously the one thing I'll say for an impact matchup is getting Devin Witherspoon and Derek Hall back. That's huge. That is going to be massive tonight, especially the way Chenna and DeMarcus Lawrence have been playing on that edge to add Derek Hall and what he was doing. Maybe we see Derek Hall get a few sacks tonight if he comes back and has an impact. And then it'll be interesting to see how the secondary looks now that we have finally Nicky Manwari and Devin Witherspoon potentially both healthy playing together. How much is Devin in the slot? The Julian Love thing, it's kind of sad because, we all are expecting him to come back. Now it's another 4 games. We won't probably get him back till December. I saw some people on, Twitter this week being like, oh, he's always been injured. Well, I don't remember him being injured much of all of last year or the year before that. Like Julian Love's been a pretty consistent player for us as a safety. And, I'd rather get him back healthy during that stretch run. And Tyler Cotta's been playing well. And me and Dan Vians talked about this. And I know, Mookie, you've heard me say it is like Tyler Cotta's playing well enough that he may make the Kobe Bryant contract situation that much more interesting come the offseason.
Yeah, and if there's a time to lose Love, yes, the Rams game is a huge one to not have. Julian Love, and because that could be a game where Ty Okada and maybe even Warwick can get exploited. Just kind of inexperienced, relatively speaking. But the Titans, I know they're giving the Chargers a tough time, but that's still a very bad football team and a bad offense. And then you got the Vikings with JJ McCarthy. There's still a kind of a wild card of outcomes with that offense. It's hard to get a read on Minnesota right now. Excuse me. I couldn't hit the mute button in time. I thought I could get away with it. But anyway, yeah, these injuries are nothing to sneeze at as far as the long term. But I think they can survive without Julian Love for a few weeks, including tonight, because they're not playing. This is not the gauntlet portion of their schedule, really. The Rams game is the important one, but they're going to be favored to win tonight. They're going to be favored against Arizona the next week. They're going to be favored for sure against Tennessee. So I said the Vikings game, but the Vikings game was after. I think that's when Love can return. But he's going to have that practice window, so it's no luck that he returns after 4 games. Nevertheless, and the Giants wasted that turnover, so they missed a field goal. What should we have expected? But anyway, yeah, Ty Okada hopefully can continue his good play. Getting Hall and Witherspoon back is big because at least you have most of your secondary now. We're going to see how they utilize Reek Woolen now that Eamon and Spoon are together for the first time for an extended period of time. And then Hall being back adds another element to your already stout run defense, in addition to what he can bring as a pass rusher. He's been much better than 0 sacks indicates. And with Chenna playing as well as he has, you got Hall, Nwosu, Tank. I mean, just those 3. You kind of wonder at this rate what that means for Boye Mafe, given Mafe will play. He's going to play tonight. But with all the reports, Jay Glazer, as you mentioned, brought it up, and Brady Henderson mentioned that teams have apparently inquired about the availability of Woolen and Mafe because they are both on expiring contracts. Well, certainly with Mafe, I think that there would be a greater chance that he gets moved than Reek because there's just more depth at that position for Seattle right now than I think people realize. But yeah, we'll figure out how much tonight influences what happens on Monday and Tuesday, because I think it could be a reasonably active day in terms of just rumors and actual moves for the Seahawks come deadline day.
I actually believe that as well, because I think if Seattle wins tonight, Mookie, I think in their mind, their timetable of this rebuild is moved up. It's moved up to we can actually viably with, you look at the NFC today, like the 49ers, yes, they're up 17, I think 3 it is, or 17-7 on the Giants. It hasn't been like they've been clearly a far superior team. You look at the Packers and Panthers right now, and the Packers can barely score, it seems like, versus Carolina, and it's 7-3. Like, there isn't really a clear-cut, hey, this is the dominant, unified team in the NFC or in the NFL for that matter as a whole. So Seattle might look at it and be like, hey, we can move up our rebuild and be a little bit more aggressive because we might have a shot to really kind of push our way through this in the back half of the season. But the last thing, and I'll ask the fan, the listeners as well in the chat here, is which team has a bigger injury edge today? Because we know that, Jaden Daniels is expected to come back off of his hamstring, but as we've seen with Julian Love, those can be a bit of a tricky thing. Terry McLaurin's out with the quad, so that relies, really heavily on Deebo Samuel in this kind of Zach Ertz passing attack. So, in my opinion, I think the edge goes to Seattle, and the fact that, yes, we may be losing a few guys, but the guys that we are losing in Julian Love and Eric Saubert tonight and Cooper Kupp, we have pretty good replacements in the backs on the other side of that compared to the situation for the Commanders.
Yeah. One other thing to note, though, is the health of Jaron Reed. Because if he can't go, then that might mean more time for Brandon Peely, I assume, just to, in that nose tackle role, because Jaron has kind of been a nose tackle for ever since he came back. But, oh, goodness, that's a bad fumble by Drake May, and it might lead to a touchdown for Atlanta down to the 5. So that's a lifeline for the Falcons. I'm sure they would love to have a huge comeback in New England just for, there's a reason why. But anyway, the Jaron Reed not being available tonight potentially is a hit to the defensive line, but they've got so much talent there with Big Cats and with Byron Murphy that, and we'll see who else is available, that I think they can withstand that for a game. It doesn't sound like there's any super big concern about Jaron Reed, because unlike Kupp, who didn't practice on Friday, I think Jaron Reed did practice. So they might just be taking it easy with him. So, yeah, I think that the injury advantage goes to Seattle, as funny as it is to say, given who they've lost. Losing Kupp, losing Love again, and then maybe losing Reed. But without McLaurin, that is a vastly different offense because they don't have what's his name, Noah Brown back either. I think so. It's like Luke McCaffrey, Debo Samuel. They're going to be relying on Zach Ertz. So I think that Seattle can withstand this tonight and probably withstand any potential multi-week injury for Cup into next week because Arizona is kind of teetering on the edge. But that Rams game is basically that needs to be all hands on deck for whoever's available.
Completely agree. That Rams game is going to be a very big one. And the Falcons right now are on the Patriots, I guess it would be 6-yard line with 20 seconds left, looking with an opportunity to score here after a strip sack of May. Oh, Penix. Oh, Penix, you got to get in the end zone there, dude.
Yeah, they have no timeouts left, so they better not screw anything up. I mean, who has ever screwed anything up against New England at the 1-yard line?
Yeah, no kidding. Let's not bring up those old wounds, but let's talk about this, Mookie. And I know it's a Seahawks podcast, but we got to talk about a Seahawks legend here, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Do you think this is Bobby Wagner's last ride this season? Do you think he hangs it up after this year? He's still an elite run defender. He's got a 91.2 grade on PFF, which is still one of the best for inside linebackers in the NFL. But I think we've seen more than anything this year is his inability to stick in coverage like he used to, and teams are exploiting it. And I think Seattle might tonight in some of their, abilities, to your point with Elijah Arroyo, where they can get matchups with Bobby Wagner having to cover an athletic tight end. But overall, do you think he's still a plus starter in the NFL at the linebacker position, or do you think he, if he wants to stay, needs to take a step back?
I do wonder. I think this is going to be the last time we see Bobby play against the Seahawks because it's only the third time, sorry, because 2 with the Rams and then 1 with the Commanders. But I think we're kind of approaching the end as far as him being in the league, even because he's got this. He's doing classes at Howard University, I believe. I know he's got his life after football really planned out, and the way the season has gone for Washington, that this maybe was kind of like a last chance, really, to make another Super Bowl run. I mean, last year was probably magical for him to leave Seattle after missing the playoffs and losing Pete and everybody, and then it's time to move on for real. And then he goes on to this team with this young, exciting rookie quarterback. He probably felt, and a lot of other young talent, he probably felt 2012 flashbacks, and to have Dan Quinn as his coach. And now this year, if they do not win tonight, they have Detroit the following week. They're pretty much screwed because it is really hard to overcome 3-6, but the potential for 3-7 heading into their trip to Spain to play the Dolphins. I don't see any way that they make the playoffs. Even just losing tonight, they would more or less have to win out to have a good shot because the NFC is deep enough. I think that 10-7 once again will not be good enough for a wild card spot. So I think this is going to be Wagner's last season. And if it is, sign that 1 day with Seattle and retire as a Seahawk because he has meant so much to the city. Everybody respects him. It's been kind of easy for Seahawks fans to take pot shots at certain ex-players. Certainly like Gino right now, or even Russ or DK. Not so much Tyler Lockett, other than people who don't like the fact that he avoids contact. But, there's a good reason for that, and he's been healthy for most of his career. But with Bobby, it's like everybody loves Bobby. But it is true that the way things have gone in pass coverage for him, I just can easily see him having to carry a crosser against Smith and Jigba or Horton, and he can't keep up. It's that the downhill stuff, it still works. He can still blitz. He can still be a good run defender in the box. It's when he has to move laterally that it's been gone for a while. And he might not agree with it, but he's supposed to not agree with it because he's a professional athlete. He probably always thinks, I'm in the best shape I've ever been. You kind of have to be a little bit overconfident in your abilities up until somebody tells you ain't got it anymore. But certainly in pass coverage, I look at the Kansas City game, it was basically whoever Bobby is covering or is in the vicinity of, throw at him. Because they had the touchdown on 4th and goal, Kareem Hunt wide open because Bobby couldn't run with Kareem. He got picked off by his own guy and he just stopped running. And then he has to carry a route with Rashee Rice. Even in his prime, that would have been tough, but he could have done it. I remember when he was way down the field in 2014 opening day, he got flagged for it. But way down the field with Randall Cobb. To ask 2025 Bobby Wagner to deal with Rashee Rice, yeah, that's not happening. So I think this is his last ride. That this season is pretty much not gone the way that he had hoped, and that the odds of him holding on to a starting job too much longer are pretty slim, which is sad to say, but We're going to see him again. He is an undeniable first ballot Hall of Famer, and he is a first class Seahawk.
I can't, argue with anything you've said there, Mookie. It hits spot on. The thing for me, I wonder about Bobby is, does he do what his linebacker running mate has done at some point and end up in coaching linebackers or defense, which I think Bobby would be a fantastic linebackers coach. KJ, I believe, is still with the 49ers in that capacity. Do you think that's something potentially down the line for Bobby Wagner? Maybe he ends up finding his way back to Seattle in a coaching capacity?
That'd be cool, but I think it is more likely that he ends up just going into business. I mean, I don't know if anybody in the chat has been to his Crumble Cookies franchise in Renton near the Landing, because he's got that. He's got an entrepreneurial mind. What I can't see is him, especially the Seahawks are eventually going to be sold, pushing for some even a small percentage of ownership stake in the Seahawks, which I think would be really, really cool. It doesn't mean it'll happen, but I can see him being a committed businessman afterward. If he coaches, that's awesome. But I don't think he's really talked about getting into coaching as much as talking about getting into the business world after football.
So let's move on, Mookie, here a little bit, and let's talk about this running game. And can it finally get going? And, I know there's a lot of people that argue, well, it's, they are running the ball. It's like, yeah, I agree. They're one of the highest run rate teams, which is great. And that leads to why the play action's been successful, because teams aren't sure if we are truly going to run it or pass it in those sets. But we need this running game to become more effective. That's the one thing that I think is the biggest culprit right now for Seattle's offense and why it struggles is I don't really feel they can truly turn around and be like, yeah, we can lean on this to sustain a drive for us. Like, the only drive this year that really sticks in my mind is the one against Pittsburgh, where eventually Ken Walker took the toss and ends up making his way into the end zone. And then the other one was that one in the preseason where I think it was against Kansas City, where we literally handed the ball off and ran it down the field to run a screen pass to Bobo for a touchdown. But outside of that, the run game's just been so sparse and inconsistent. It's like the old Mickey Mouse car that can barely make it up the hill. It's just sputtering as it goes up. What do you think is going to be the key to finally unlocking this run game? Maybe tonight even.
Tonight would be one of those times where I think getting this Commanders defense to run laterally, to run to the outside, could work. I think the outside zone could actually work against Washington because they're a slow defense. I mean, it's not just Wagner. They're a slow, aging defense. On a weekly basis, when I see them, I actually forget that Von Miller signed with them. I mean, they are the oldest team in the league on average, and it shows. They just don't have great team speed, really anywhere, unless it's somebody like Frankie Louvu, who is a danger to Seattle. But other than that, it's an unremarkable defense right now, and it is feeling a lot like the Dan Quinn Falcons teams, where Dan Quinn, if he hires the right coordinator, can have a hell of an offense, but Dan Quinn, the head coach, has not consistently produced good defenses, whether in Atlanta or even Washington's defense last year was bad, and they're pretty much the same this year. So I think that the run game could get going tonight. But when I mentioned all this outside stuff, they are dead last in EPA per play running outside the tackles, and they are much better, while not being great, running inside the tackles. I don't know if Johnny Newton is playing. I think he is, but I mean, he was somebody I wanted over Byron Murphy even, but I think he's actually been playing well. But still, I think there'll be opportunities against this Commanders defense to get some explosive running plays off. I feel like this should be a Ken Walker game. And the interesting bits that we learned and maybe kind of got reiterated is that they've been load managing Walker in game to prevent him from getting overworked, quote unquote, to avoid getting hurt, essentially. Now, he hasn't shown up on the injury report one time this year, and I do kind of wonder about why he hasn't been on the injury reports, if this is just a load management thing. Like, is he healthy enough to not be on the injury report, or is he still really so hurt that he probably should have been on this injury report the whole time? But I'm not going to snitch. Anyway, yeah, I think this run game has a chance to get going. I'd like to see them mix it up more. I'd like to see more dual blocks. I'd like to see them spam some more inside looks that we saw at times in the Houston game, but also the Pittsburgh game. And one other thing that I'm sure you'll bring up, Robbie Oots being back, I think can open up their playbook. Not saying that it's going to mean that everything's going to work, but Robbie Oots being back means that they can do things with him in the game that they couldn't do with Brady Russell, because Russell's just not a traditional fullback. And the lack of the healthy receivers fully acknowledging losing Cooper Cup means losing Cooper Cup's blocking. The lack of healthy receivers, they might be trying to have a lot of heavier personnel. More 12, more 13. We'll get to see Nick Callera probably for an extended period of time for the first time. So I'm curious to see what the game plan adjustments are. Like, we already know they're kind of a run heavy team, but are they going to be even more run heavy as a result of the injuries of wide receiver? And conversely, is Washington going to be more inclined to load the box, knowing that Seattle is down as many receivers as they are?
Well, and that's going to be an interesting thing. I think that's the one biggest thing is what do the boxes look like for Seattle in this game? Because I have a feeling, to your point, that the Commanders are going to go out of their way to load that box and really say, okay, we're taking away any opportunity for you to run the ball. We want to see you beat us with, and we're going to double, if not bracket over JSN all game long, not give him easy releases off the line. And we're going to make Torrey Horton and these tight ends beat us tonight. Like, that's what I think Dan Quinn is probably going to try and do. And this is where I'd like to see, like, part of the run game too, is we always think, okay, it's got to be the running backs. Well, no, like, run some jet sweeps. Let Torrey Horton take a jet sweep and get to that outside. Like, do some things that are going to stretch them laterally to then open up the middle of the field. And that's the one thing we haven't seen a lot of this year is these jet sweeps that are such a staple of this offense to get teams going laterally. And so that's going to be one of the big things. You look at this, and especially with the Seahawks offensive line, they give up a quick pressure rate. They're 29th in the NFL with that right now, which is not a great place to be on quick pressure rate on true dropbacks. Having Robbie Oots back, though, will, I think, lead to more 21 personnel tonight, which we haven't seen for the last few weeks with him being out. That's something I definitely want to see. Overall with this team, there's 202 attempts on the ground this year for 743 yards, which is about a 3.7 yards per carry. I'd like to see that yards per carry get to 4.7. I'd like a full another yard in that, because now you're looking at second shorts, and that's going to go to one of my keys of the game that we'll talk about here shortly. But overall, like, Mookie, I'll ask you this, and I'll ask the listeners here, over under. Seattle gets over 125 rushing yards tonight.
I'm going to go slightly over. I think they hit like 130, and we might count some Darnold scrambles in there, but I think 130 from the design runs. I think that Walker is due to pop a big one. And please, Zach Charbonnet cannot go the whole season averaging under 3 yards a carry. It'd be one of the least efficient running back seasons of all time, because it's not like he's getting backup snaps. Him and Walker are more or less splitting the carries close to 50-50. So he has 5 touchdowns on the year. Nobody else in the league who has got under 3 yards per carry has more than two touchdowns. So Charbonnet, we know, can be a good player when he has the blocking, and the same applies to Walker. But I think Walker has he has that extra ability, athletic ability in him to break a big run. And as you said, let's get Horton and JSN involved in those jet sweeps. Like, use the receivers as an extension of the running game, the way like Amon-Ra St. Brown is for Detroit. Or I know Xavier Worthy is just a speed demon, but like, for example, him in Kansas City, like, other teams could do that. Heck, the Rams have done it with Puka Nacua, and nobody ever thinks of Puka Nacua as one of the fastest players in the league. So you have those opportunities, a little bit of misdirection to get defenses thinking a bit more instead of trying to be a little too overly traditional with what you want to do in your run game.
All right, Mookie, well, let's get to these keys of the game. So 3 keys to victory for me. Key number 1, you got to win first down and control the sticks. And this is one thing that we've talked about the last few weeks is Seattle's third down conversion rate has plummeted to one of the bottom in the NFL. If the Seahawks want to stay in rhythm, it starts on first down. They're converting just 36.4% of their third downs, which is not a great rate. That's, I think, 27th, 28th right now in the NFL. Too many drives are stalling early, so get ahead of the sticks so this Kubiak offense can actually open up the play action, keep Washington off balance, and have some early efficiency drives. That's going to be everything in this game, because I think if this game gets mucky and just hangs around, this is where if Jaden Daniels is healthy enough, his legs could pose a bit of a problem for Seattle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the early down stuff has been an issue for Seattle because they run on early downs at a very high clip, and especially on second down. And they're near the bottom of the league in yards per carry on early down runs. I imagine that there were actual efficiencies that we can take out context, things like, hey, here's a 2-yard touchdown run on second and goal, for example. But if we added like EPA per player or some sort of DVOA metric that I don't have in front of me, I bet you that they're a below average team, even still, in success rate and everything else running on early downs. So that is a known problem for Seattle right now. So yes, controlling the stick so that you want to get better on third down, avoid it. And I
Yep.
feel like we not necessarily you and I, but we as Seahawks fans have probably been talking about that for like 13 years now, because Seattle was very rarely a good third down team with Russ. 2015 and I think 2012 are the only two times that they've been in the top half of the league there, or at least the top 12. And then they were not a good third down offense through the entirety of the Geno era. They were actually doing okay these first 4 or 5 games of the season with Sam. They were bad in the Niners game, but they were great against Tampa Bay, for example, and great against Pittsburgh. But these last 2 weeks, you go 3 for 26 combined. That's going to plummet your ranking considerably, and that's what's happened. So we're kind of back to square one on that front, where they're running the ball on early downs, but they're not doing a good job of it, and they're getting to third and long too often. And while Darnold isn't getting sacked, 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8 is 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8, and those are not high probability conversion rates.
Key number 2 for me, Mookie, is they got to reestablish the physicality up front. And what I'm saying about that is Seattle's run game's been stuck at that 3.7, which we just talked about, roughly 96 yards per game. The Commanders right now are allowing 4.3 yards per carry. So that's like what I was talking about, that full yard you can almost get. That's what you have to take advantage of. There's a lane to exploit if the leverage wins. And so, yes, Bobby Wagner right now has an elite run grade as a linebacker. Seattle has to match the physicality up front, snap for snap, and actually run this ball effectively tonight.
Yeah, they have to be more physical. And Washington does not have Dorrance Armstrong, I believe, for the rest of the season. So that's another key part of their defensive front who's not a factor. I think that's, yes, as you said, they got to be more physical and they got to be just more assignment sound. So the onus really, to me, is on Sundell and Bradford to just, it's time to really tighten up your games, because those two have been probably the biggest liabilities in the run game. And even Abe Lucas, to a degree, has been getting pushed back a little bit more often. But when they've been running to the right of Lucas, so meaning outside of his shoulder, I think that's when he's been at his best. It's really just Sundell and Bradford can't be just losing immediately off the snap. We're not really seeing it with Cross. We're not really seeing it with Zabel. We are seeing it with the interior, which is where Johnny Newton could certainly make an impact for Washington if he's playing. But ultimately, it's the other side where I want to see Seattle's defensive line dominate Washington's O-line. Where Washington's O-line is okay. Their running game, of course, is something worth respecting, and the Seahawks run defense has been amazing. But if they can make life uncomfortable for Jaden Daniels, we know how dangerous Daniels is, then I don't think that Washington has too many answers in terms of what they can do to combat that. I know that Kingsbury loves his screens. I think that McDonald has coached this team up well enough to be keying in on that, because I don't expect them to be airing it out a ton, meaning airing it out deeper down the field.
Yeah, I think tonight the one thing we're going to see from the Commanders is, to your point, like we got to see this defensive line get after that offensive line there. But the thing is they're going to want to get that ball out of Daniel's hands as quickly as possible and not make him run around. Even on their own right, they don't need him popping his hamstring again and being out for a considerable amount of time if they are going to try and make a run here late. But the big thing I would say for Seattle is just Chenna, DeMarcus Lawrence, Derek Hall, go to work. Go to work on these guys. And I think Leo and Byron Murphy are going to cause a huge problem in the middle. I will say, Mookie, you brought his name up earlier. Brandon Peely, I think, is going to have a huge game tonight, even if Jaron Reed is playing, because I think he's going to end up having to spare Reed at points where Reed normally would be able to take more of the reps. If they are able to get him to play, I think Peely's going to have a big factor tonight, which he's been playing really well. And I think they may have something on their hands here where they may have found a new nose tackle, inside one tech that they can use on a more regular basis going forward in years to come. But number 3 for me, let the defense, to your point, Mookie, set the tone. Right now, we have a top 6 scoring defense, 19.4 points per game. We're pressuring at almost a 50% rate with four rushers, and we're allowing just 3.3 yards per carry right now. So our run defense is lead. The mix of the distribution and discipline is what Seattle's winning with right now, and the fact that they can do a bunch of different things. McDonald's been dialing up the blitz packages. He's getting Witherspoon back. He's getting Derek Hall back. if they can contain Jaden Daniels and make him throw from the pocket, create pressure, collapse that pocket, they're going to force some turnovers, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, definitely. And turnovers are going to be a big thing for Seattle the second half of the season. One, they turn it over way too much. And two, they're getting interceptions. They're just not getting fumbles. They haven't forced one yet officially because a couple of the ones they did force were no plays, and they haven't recovered a fumble. And the one loss that the Commanders had at home was to the Bears, and Daniels turned it over 3 times, I believe. But no, Krosky Merritt, I think, lost a fumble, and Daniels had a pick, and he had a bad exchange with Krosky Merritt, or one of the running backs. And that not only was a lost fumble, Chicago got a game-winning drive out of that. So Daniels is known to be a low turnover guy, but there will be opportunities, I think, for Seattle's defense to take the ball away. Excuse me. As far as letting the defense, quote unquote, set the tone, yeah, it has to start up front. And I think that the secondary can deal with Washington's receivers, especially without McLaurin, who is the special downfield threat on that team, without some sort of fancy scheming up to get a guy open. I know McCaffrey's been playing better than he did in his rookie year, but McLaurin is a top 10 receiver. And oh boy, Tucker Kraft is limping off the field. I don't know if anybody's watching, but Green Bay is losing at home right now to Carolina. And I know the Packers are 5-1-1. And actually, I think a Green Bay loss would help Seattle if you're so minded to push for the top seed in the NFC. They have an amazing record, and they have rarely looked like a Super Bowl force, and at least not since week 1. So that's why the NFC is so wide open, and maybe why Seattle's being aggressive at the deadline. But and then McManus just missed a field goal, so it's still 7-6. Yes, so I think that the defense, especially with how shorthanded the offense is, the onus is on them to really put the foot down and limit this Washington offense to underneath plays, no yards after catch, and don't do anything silly to gift them points. No silly penalties, none of that stuff, because both the offense and the defense have been prone to certain mistakes, not even penalties, but turnovers and penalties that have kind of gifted points to the opposition.
Yeah, but tonight, the one thing, Mookie, I think we haven't even talked about is how good this game is going to look. You've got the old school, I know they're still called the Commanders, but they're going with the old school Redskins style of jersey with the Commanders W on the helmet. And then the Seahawks are wearing their throwback blues, old school, retro. It would have been really nice to see if the Seahawks at this point could have had their throwback roads, and we could have seen them in the white versus the Redskins or the Commanders style of the red. But what I'll ask right now, the chat, you guys put it in there. What's your most important key? Key 1, get the third down execution up. Key 2, pass rush, let this defense get after him. Or key 3, which is getting this run game going. You guys tell us in the chat which one's for you, which one you think is the most important key for Seattle to get that victory tonight. And with that being said, we're going to get into our 12's Q&A Blitz. There's been a lot of great, participation in the chat today, which is awesome from everyone. So we'll start with the first one here. We got Dennis. He goes, why do coaches lie about injuries and IR, especially after the bye? Love with a hamstring for 8 weeks. Is wow is all I can say now. Cup, what's happening?
Okay, so with Love, I think they rushed him back. I think they rushed him back. Him and Witherspoon got rushed back in the Cardinals game. And there's sort of a tough situation here, because I think without Love, they might have lost that game, because he made some huge plays throughout that afternoon, or throughout that evening, because it was a Thursday night game. But hamstrings are tricky, man. So it doesn't take much to re-aggravate or cause something that makes it worse. So there's very rarely do you have the 1 week hamstring injury. It's something that you got to monitor. So if he had a setback, if he was rehabbing and he had something bad happen, well, that's a tough break. He had only missed 3 games in his entire career prior to this season, and now he's going to miss
half the season, almost.
Yeah, basically half the season. So he's not an injury prone. I was befuddled at some of the responses that we got on the Field Goals Twitter account, like, "Oh my God, he's always injured." No, he's not. You copied and pasted whatever you said about Chenna Wilson, applied it to Julian Love, and it's really stupid because it looks even more inaccurate given Love's history. And then with Cooper Kupp, we had a bye week, so we didn't really know the extent of Kupp's injury if he had one in the game, because remember, he was on the injury report with a heel, and then they added the hamstring thing afterward on Thursday. So that's the nature of the beast, and they're not putting him on IR or anything. They still got to wait it out and see what goes on with his health. But Yeah, it's bad luck, and it's also some of it is for guys who popped up in the injury report this week, like Sam Darnold, for example. I think we know why that happened. It was the personal foul
The hit.
penalty, I think,
Yeah.
by Alshire. But if we had a game last week, then it would have shown up. But if Sam Darnold's on the injury report now, full participant, nobody really cares, then all of that matters. Basically, all that's going on is just the timing. There just happened to be a break last week. He could have been on the injury report the week before had they had a game.
The one injury actually for me that's most interesting is Eric Saubert's one, because there was that weird moment where he was off the roster, then back on the roster for roster construction. Then he's on it for the bye week, and now he's gone to IR for 4 weeks.
Yep. And that could be a big thing because he is a important part of their heavier packages. But again, I'm excited to see what Callum can do because he was the one where we go, no way did he make the roster. He wasn't anywhere near my thoughts as far as making the roster. So, but when you get to your third tight end, I mean, we're not talking about a huge thing going on as far as, man, I hope that Nick Callerup can become tight end one. I'm hoping Nick Callerup can be another Eric Saubert, basically. So, yeah, that's curious as that's the little roster fiddling about there because he was on the veteran salary benefit when he was cut.
So Kevin comes in, he goes, will tonight determine how aggressive we get with trading or trying to get an edge? I don't know if Seattle views the edge as a point of massive upgrade needing there. I think this tonight will be more of an indication of what they do at the receiver position in the trade deadline. What do they do at the right guard position in the trade deadline? Because the run game is still struggling and it's due to some of the Anthony Bradford issues. I'm almost certain we'll see some sort of trade by Seattle. And then the other thing I think, Mookie, to talk about here is maybe we see how aggressive they are at the weak side linebacker, Drake Thomas struggles tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we're bringing Derek from beyond the grave there, and playing him out of position. But yeah, Drake Thomas. Yeah, I mean, we still got to see Drake tested a little bit more against better offenses because I think that again, he is a better downfield player and better tackler. Where if he's in space, that's where there's a noticeable difference between him and Ernest Jones at the respective positions. But yeah, I don't rule out them trying to see if there's another safety. Another safety there just for depth reasons. I'd be surprised because Rob Sand was bringing up like, could Seattle trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick? Because Miami should be sellers. They certainly sold the season down the drain, but I don't think that they would make that move. I'd be pretty surprised if they did. So that's just something on the back burner. But yeah, wide receiver and right guard. Center could be something if they trade Oluwatimi, but there's never been an inkling of that happening. So yeah, basically wide receiver, right guard, maybe weak side linebacker. But yeah, those to me are the quote several positions that I almost said John Schneider. Jay Glazer was talking about in terms of Seattle being aggressive. I think they know those are areas where it's unlikely to get a plus starter, some like Pro Bowl caliber player, but it's where that they have enough weaknesses in depth or at the starting position that they want to try to find some way to have an upgrade similar to like Tedrick Thompson to Quandre Diggs. Quandre wasn't a Pro Bowler at the time, or literally anybody on Seattle's 2020 pass rush rotation, and to Carlos Dunlap. Dunlap was a Pro Bowl caliber player, but he was toward the twilight of his career. So something of that nature, I think, could work out. I don't expect a Dwayne Brown style trade.
Yeah, I don't. The only one I would say, I don't know. Again, Dwayne Brown was a All Pro at the time, but I still think for me, my money, if I was to go to a casino and put some money down on it, it would be something where Seattle gets Rashid Shaheed and Cesar Ruiz out of New Orleans for maybe Mafe and a pick or something like that. That's where I think they go. You get a 2-for-1. You deal with two positions. You bring in a receiver that adds something to your roster you currently don't have, and you're getting a young O-lineman that's plug and play at the right guard position that knows this system and had his best year under this staff as a right guard. I think that's what you get with Seattle if they do anything like that. So we'll see. Curtis Allen in here. Love Curtis. Great guest when he comes on the show. Does some amazing work over at Seahawks Draft Blog for cap analysis and such. So if you guys ever get a chance, read Curtis's write-ups about the cap and even his keys to the game that he brings out every week over there on the Seahawks Draft Blog. But he goes, keep an eye on who plays in the second half, fourth quarter, if the game is in hand. It'll be fascinating to see if they pull Mafe late. Yeah, that's a good point. If Seattle gets up in this game and they start pulling certain guys, that would be an interesting development.
God bless you, Curtis, because of that big line there. If the game is in hand, I know you've watched more than enough Seahawks football to know that unless they're playing the absolute dregs of the NFL like the Saints, game is in hand is not something. And in prime time too. Oh boy, that's and at that stadium, I would be surprised if the game was in hand. But I hope that you're right, and that we see certain players if they're not. It's we're kind of treating this like the last game of preseason in a way. Like whoever
Yep.
isn't playing or whoever actually is playing that is on the first team and then is playing into the second quarter like MVS, that can be your hint as to who's staying, who's safe, and who's about to go.
Kevin back in here. He goes, would cornerback be a position we try and be aggressive with also? I don't see them moving Reek Woolen. I think they'll keep him till the end of the year unless they get blown away with an offer. And with that being said, they could still add somebody as a depth piece, maybe a guy at that back end, but I think they feel comfortable with, Shaq and such. Maybe they add somebody because they don't trust Nehemiah Pritchett. And sorry, if Jackson Dart keeps lowering his head into defenders, his NFL career is going to be really short here.
Yes.
But yeah, they potentially, Kevin, they could go after the cornerback as depth more than anything. They're not going to go get someone that's going to be an upgrade or a top 3 guy in this rotation.
If they trade Reek, they need to get a starter.
Yeah.
And if they don't trade Reek, then I think they're set at the quarterback position. So a cornerback position, because you would have Reek, you would have Job, you'd have, and then you would have Kendrick as a reserve as well. So you basically have your options there. That's your kind of main sets, the trio of Spoon, Job, and Reek, as we expected in week 1. I want to break that up just on the belief that the depth is gonna show out. So like Jair Alexander got traded yesterday from Baltimore to Philly. The fact that he got traded in season after waiting until September to sign, that tells you how much he probably has left. And he was also been injured for much of the year. I don't think there are too many corners who are going to be on the market, really. And there hasn't been an inkling that we're going to see a bunch of corners get traded. Like if Cam Taylor-Britt gets dealt by Cincinnati, he is the exact type of corner I don't think Mike McDonald would tolerate much.
No, he wouldn't. Bob Thatcher in here. Good to see you. Bob, I've heard trade rumors earlier today with Miami for both Waddle and Phillips. What are your thoughts? Jalen Phillips for me is too injury prone for a guy that you can, and it sounds like Miami wants at least a second or third round pick for that. I'd rather keep Boye Mafe at that point instead of giving up for Jalen Phillips. Waddle's interesting to me because he does add that speed component, but again, I just don't know how he'd fit in the Kubiak offense is the other point to this. A lot of what he does, is kind of what you get with JSN to a point. And again, it's going to be adding for someone that's not going to go in and need to eat away at targets from Kupp and some of these other pieces as well if you're adding this receiver room. I don't know, Mookie, what are your thoughts?
I think Waddle would cost too much. Don't get me wrong. He's a very, very good receiver, but Seattle would have to be in super dire straits. If they trade for Waddle, then he's a wide receiver 2 immediately. I mean, he go from the wide receiver. Why would he be a wide receiver 2 in Miami? And with Hill gone right now, he's a wide receiver 1 to go to Seattle to be the third option in a run heavy offense. So I don't think that we would see Waddle out here. Phillips, for the same reason that you mentioned. I mean, 2023 ruptured Achilles, 2024 season-ending knee injury. You get those two things back to back, and I know we've got some amazing modern medicine and all sorts of things. That's the type of thing, especially for bigger guys like him, that can wreck your career. So that would have to be like the lowest of low-cost trades for me. Ultimately, because Seattle only has 6 picks next year, I believe that they're going to be very judicious in terms of the way that they would trade any draft picks. Like, I don't want them to be entering April with 4 or 5 picks. I can easily see them having pick swaps as opposed to trading 2026 capital away and then only getting a player back in return.
Agreed. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. He goes, long-term, do you think, he goes, long-term, do you think Cable will get a chance to start next season, or do they go after a free agent guard or high-drafted guard? From what I've heard from people that are connected, they do really like Cable Do. So I think he will get a shot in next year's camp because I don't think Anthony Bradford and potentially Christian Haynes, either one of them will be on the roster next year. I do expect Seattle to look in free agency, though, and the draft for another guard. I don't think that's going to, even though they like Cable Do, I think they've learned their lesson over the last few years until they find the right piece. Now, again, if they trade for a Cesar Ruiz and they get him in here, I think, again, that changes the optics of how this looks. Cable Do is probably still going to be on the team. he'll be a guy they keep developing in the wings because I think Ruiz would still have 2 years left on his deal. And I think that high draft pick potentially look at the center position for that. So I don't know, Mookie, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think that they're still going to be looking, maybe not high draft capital, but just throwing picks at it. So, like last year, I know it's a different staff in effect that they took. What's his name? They took Satao Lamea, who, by the way, is not on an NFL roster right now. Forget practice squad; he's not on a roster. Neither is Damian Martinez, I believe. So, yeah, Lamea, and they took. Jarrell was basically a tackle, but they drafted a few offensive line, and then, of course they took Christian Haynes while having already had Bradford for 2 seasons, so or actually 1 season, and now this year they have Cable Do. Mason Richmond is also somebody who can play. They played him across the line, so when you're looking at lower end draft picks and they're not getting playing time right now, I think you can always have plenty of competition, especially since this is not tackle, it's guard and center. Those are places where historically lower draft capital is spent. I think they're going to be kind of taking more flyers there next year. And if the right guy comes along in free agency, maybe they sign them. But otherwise, yeah, Cable Dude's got a shot. He absolutely has a shot. But they're going to keep that competition healthy. And like you said, Bradford, not only do I not expect him back next year, I don't totally rule out that any trade happens involves Bradford.
Yeah.
Not Bradford on his own. It'd have to be Bradford and something else, because Bradford on his own has no trade value.
Yeah, Bradford has no universal positional value either, right? So he's not going to be someone that goes, okay, now that we've done here, we can move him to right tackle, or if we need to swing, he is a right guard. That is what he is. And I think Bradford needs to go to a power gap scheme. I think that's what he needs to. It suits his skill set. They kept trying to sell us that he can move in this one. I don't see it, and I haven't seen it. So
he's moving. It's just moving backwards too much.
Or into his own guys. He's like a ping ball in that regard. But Islam comes in. He goes the era of the young Bobby Wagner's, Patrick Willis for the Niners, and Luke Kuechly for the Panthers were exciting times. Yes, that was some exciting defensive football and linebacker play in the NFL at that period of time when you had that group.
Yeah, and it's something that Bobby fittingly was the one who has lasted the longest. And with Patrick and Luke, it's just unfortunate for Luke especially, because he was amazing. And I know that we had the whole Kuechly versus Bobby debate, but it's just fan stuff. The fact that he retired so young, he was a special player, and so was Patrick Willis, begrudgingly so, knowing that he was with San Francisco. But yes, that era of linebacker play, I don't think we're really ever going to get that again, because even though the linebackers sort of making a comeback, that there's more value to having off-ball linebackers. And I'm just watching the Titans on 4th and goal at the 1, might have either fumbled or they got stuffed, and it looks like they got stuffed. So that's why the Titans are 1-7, folks. But yes, the days of highly valuing classic middle linebacker play might be on the wayside, because teams just prefer to, and the league in general is focused so heavily on the edge rushers, certain defensive tackles, and cornerbacks. So linebackers not as important as it once was in decades past.
And there's one name that I would add to that list, and unfortunately was a 49er as well, and injuries shortened his career, and that was Navarro Bowman.
Yep. And well, we kind of know what happened there, because that was the NFC Championship game, and it was the ugliness of the popcorn spilling on him. I don't think, from what I remember, it wasn't a fan who threw popcorn at him. It was just spilled accidentally, but still, it just would look terrible. And it was the Curse fumbled the ball. It should have been Niners' ball. And then Lynch fumbled the ball in the next snap anyway. Or Wilson, and they had a botch exchange. So it didn't matter much in the context of the play, but in the context of his career, that was a bummer. I mean, the Niners had that run. Remember, Chris Borland was kind of and he retired because of concussion fear. So now they got Fred Warner. So yeah, Fred Warner right now, as young and obviously as somebody who's himself out for the year, he is kind of carrying the load in terms of making middle linebacker still a glamorous position moving forward.
I think you can throw Ernest Jones in that conversation as well. Outside
until we get some respect, PFF, please grade him better.
Yeah, no kidding. Amy Holmes, one of our great moderators of the chat. Always appreciate what Amy does in the chat, keeping it a great environment there. She goes, how do they load the box and stop JSN at the same time? Rolling your safety over top. You can load the box and drop guys into coverage out of it, but the look initially, Amy, is that you load the box to stop the run. They run, everyone crashes in, and they've got their cues based on play. And what you'll see is a safety roll over top. That's how they will attempt to try and load a box and stop JSN. Most teams have failed at it this year, but Dan Quinn's one of the few coaches I think could potentially cause some issues in that regard. Bob comes back in with Jalen Phillips and Boye for a conditional 2026 fifth rounder. That, again, makes no real sense to me. I'd keep Boye Mafe in that situation just because of Jalen Phillips' injury history.
Yeah. I'm not that's too much to give up for somebody who was productive before he got injured. But the operative words there are before he got injured. Because again, Achilles and knee, really any Achilles rupture, you gotta be sleeping with one eye open as far as the health of that player moving on.
Yeah, agreed. Prime comes in. I just want to see the Hawks play a game where they impose their will in all three phases. Got the faith they will. Go Hawks. That is what I am hoping for as well, Prime. It's been one of my biggest takeaways. I talked about it on the Syndicate show. I talked about it on the 12 Talk podcast with Josh and Mitch, who run a great show over on the other side of the pond there, that the Seahawks have yet to do that this year. They haven't played a full game yet in all phases. And the closest we saw was New Orleans. But as we've seen, New Orleans is one of the worst teams in the NFL outside of the New York Jets. This is an opportunity for them to do it against a better competition and a better team. But I think for me, the game that I want to see that the most come up in is that Rams game in a few weeks.
Yeah. All three phases. I'm hoping the special teams can hold up with the guys they're losing. No Derek. Bubble's not been playing as much on special teams, but losing Young is definitely a bummer. But I'm hoping the special teams on the kicking side can hold up its end of the bargain because Myers is sub 80% on his accuracy this year. I know he had a kick blocked, but he also had a kick against Pittsburgh that was ruled blocked, but it turns out it actually wasn't. And that was inside of 40 yards. And he's had like that 26-yarder against Houston after he had the kick blocked, barely snuck inside the upright. And we were watching this in camp where he's hugging the uprights a lot this year. So I'm a little bit concerned about Myers having one of those odd year performances. But keep in mind, Washington, I think their kicker is hurt. So I believe they've got a backup kicker going into tonight. So that might influence how the game is called. But Dan Quinn, unlike his teacher, if you will, Pete Carroll, Dan Quinn is very willing to go for it on fourth down. So maybe another key to the game, Seattle should go out of its way to treat third down like another fourth down. In other words, if it's 3rd and 10, do not concede 9 yards. Like pretend it's 3rd and 6 instead of 3rd and 10, even though it's 3rd and 10.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. I think we have more luck running up the middle, so that makes me think we might see more Sharps tonight, potentially. But Walker's been actually quite good in the middle. Both of them struggle to the outside. They've both been much better running in between the tackles. I want to see more split zone tonight and really finding those cutback lanes and hitting them, because to your point earlier, Mookie, if we get this team moving laterally, they don't have the recovery speed to step back inside and make those tackles on the cutback. So that'll be interesting. Corey's in here. He goes, I'm surprised Lamea isn't on a team again. I know he wasn't that great, but he seemed more mentally consistent. Yeah, but his lapses, Corey, in actual blocking assignments is what I think is causing him to have issues staying on a team.
If you can't, I think we got excited about Lamea because one, he wasn't Bradford. And two, he did some good GT counter stuff. But like if you actually watch the full game, especially the pass blocking, the pass pro reps are so bad. And that's untenable to be even a practice squad player potentially. So regardless of what scheme he's in, if that can't be figured out, you're not going to have a long NFL career. I'm sure he'll get signed. The practice squad fodder is always going to be a thing. He can get a reserve futures contract, no problem.
And Corey comes back when I think Arroyo is going to have a big game. I would love to see it. I'd love to see 70 yards from Arroyo.
Yeah, I'd like to see him be among the leading target getters tonight outside of JSN. So, like, if he gets, say, 4 catches for 55 yards on 6 or 7 targets, like, and expecting Darnold's not going to throw it 35, 40 times tonight, I would be content with that because he's technically not the tight end one. But I also think that this could be a big game for A.J. Barner. I think that Barner could have a breakout game as a receiver And darn it, Drake May with a bad throw and interception. This is what I get for starting him in 2 of my fantasy leagues over at Sleeper. But Atlanta's in trouble, and Green Bay is. I mean, Jordan Love just had one of his passes picked, and that's led to a touchdown. Despite Bryce Young's repeated efforts to give the ball right back, Rico Dowdle just walked in. That could be a significant result. Carolina has been an odd team to figure out. That may actually be a tougher game than we think. The Seattle at Carolina, the second to last week of the season. So after the Rams game and before the last Niners game, Carolina is in between. If Carolina actually wins this, they're 5-4, which, as ugly as they performed last week, I think they're just inconsistent. They're just not a terrible team. They're a team worth some level of respect. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on them over the next few weeks.
All right. What else we've got here that's popped up in the chat? Dennis comes in with, I'm not as informed as you guys, but why do the Seahawks only have 6 picks and that's not even 1 pick around?
I think they gave up a 2026 pick in one of the trades. I don't know if
Nick
it was
Harris.
It was the Nick Harris trade. I didn't remember if they gave up a 2026 pick for Robertson Harris. But yeah, it was one of the trades from last year. The either midway through last year or the year before that. So it wasn't anything that happened this offseason, I believe.
Johnny, he goes, is Cup def out? I don't see the official word. I believe it was Adam Schefter that posted it late last night that stated that Cup's questionable, but it's trending to him being out is what he's heard.
If he didn't practice on Friday and they ended up calling 2 Carolina
wide receivers up.
2, and you call Cody and Ricky White up, and Ricky White hasn't even come close to getting a call up this whole season, reason to believe that Cup can't go. So I expect him to be inactive. So I would expect no Cup, no Derek, so that's 2 inactives, and then no Bobo, so that's
Bobo.
3 inactives. We haven't brought him up, but I kind of wonder if they're going to make Milroe active tonight. And if they are, please do not do any stupid shenanigans as far as whenever he's in the game. Let it be within the context of something sensible. As I just watched Daniel Jones get picked by Jack Sawyer of Pittsburgh. So Daniel Jones is having a tough time, and the Colts might suffer an upset loss. Every time it looks like Tomlin's back is against the wall and we're ready to write him off, Pittsburgh just comes up with some huge win when they absolutely need to. But anyway, yeah, I think that Cup is not going to play, but we already know who the inactives are going to be for the most part.
Mookie, I swear to all that is Seahawk holy, if they do weird Milroe shit now because you brought it up, you and me are going to have a conversation off air about
yes.
Curtis Allen comes in. He goes, FYI, Brady Henderson is hinting at Seahawks extending JSN and Spoon early. That completely makes sense to me, especially the JSN side of that.
Yeah, because they got 50-year options coming up. And at this point, with wide receivers, you want to lock in their contracts as soon as possible, because that's a market that I don't think is ever going to be suppressed. You're going to see them making more and more over time, as opposed to other positions like linebacker and running back, where they're not getting that super top market deal that they used to get. No Sean Alexander, here's an 8-year, $50 million contract from the Ruskell days. Like those days are over. But yeah, I think there's every reason to at least extend JSN early, because what you have right now is somebody who is playing like the best receiver in the league or close to it.
Agreed. HHG comes in with hashtag more Bobo. Unfortunately, Bobo is injured with an Achilles. Right? Yeah, no kidding. He hasn't ruptured it, but apparently he has an Achilles injury. So we'll see how that goes. And Curtis Allen back in. He goes, Steelers fans had a funeral for their defense in the parking lot before the game. Maybe it woke up their D. Yeah, their D is playing with their hair on fire. It's interesting because the Vikings here are capitalizing on Detroit today, it looks like. They just got a strip from Montgomery, and now the Vikings have the ball in scoring position again. So it's going to be interesting to see how this Sunday shapes up by the time the Seahawks take the field. But Mookie, let's get into this last thing before we leave here. Score predictions. Mookie, what is your score prediction for tonight's game?
I think the lack of receivers for Seattle makes this a close game. And the fact that this is a Seahawks game also makes this a close game. So I'm going to go with something like similar to what the Houston game was. So instead of 27-19, I'm going to go with like 24-17, where the Commanders will have some good drives, but they won't sustain enough consistently. And then the Seahawks are going to hit some big plays that lead to touchdowns. And they might have to deal with a late push from Washington, a potential game-tying drive. And this defense will step up. That is one thing that I am worried about, is that Washington runs a lot of no huddle. And where we have seen the Seahawks defense struggle at times is when it's no huddle or 2-minute drill offenses where they can't sub their guys out. And we saw it in the Arizona game for sure, and saw it at times against San Francisco. So they're going to have to snap that out, because they've had 3 blown game-winning drive defensive stands already. The Tampa game, the San Francisco game, and then Arizona. Did a good job against Jacksonville, and technically they never had to deal with one against Houston. So, yeah, I think that Seattle wins this 24-17, and they keep the good times going on the road. I mean, you have to like their chances in every road game this year to win, except for the Rams game, and then it's to be determined against San Francisco, because you don't know who they're going to have and what's at stake in Week 18. But the other road games, you would think that they have a greater than 50% chance to win.
And for me over here, Mookie, I'm going to go 27-20 Seahawks. I think it is a one-score game towards the end of it, because I agree. I think there'll be some sort of late push or something from the Commanders. But I think Seattle will look like they're in control most of this game. They will have some up and down moments where we're kind of sitting there going, okay, can we get this going again, especially on offense? I expect, though, Elijah Arroyo and Torrey Horton to be more involved in the offense than maybe we expect at this point. And I think it's, a night that potentially we see maybe K9 or Charbonnet has a bit of a breakout game. I'm not saying over 100 yards for an individual, but at least more consistent running from that group there. So I'm going 27-20. But with all that being said, everyone, that's going to do it for us here on the Hawk's Eye Live preview show. I want to thank Mookie for coming on and doing this as he does so regularly with me. And to all of you 12s in the chat, appreciate what you guys will do. We'll see you guys after this game tomorrow night for Seahawks Aftermath with myself and Michael Thompson. And we'll break down this matchup as the Seahawks and Commanders play tonight. So with all that being said, stay loud, stay proud, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.